Chapter 15. New bonds formed. The next several days were spent preparing for their journey. It was decided that Ladiel, Nahim, Aelist, and the Biolans would remain with the Free Eagles until Merlara and her companions had left. Since Tyor would torture them for information if they were caught, it would be best if Merlara and her friends were far away by then. There was no guarantee they would be able to conceal what they knew. It would also draw the Seldrians' attention as well, which could prove fatal. So far, they owed their present safety to both. Tyor now knew the dragons were helping her sister. Aside from the shock of such a revelation, she was currently distracted with either killing or enslaving those who opposed her, of which there were plenty, and assessing the damage the dragons had done to the citadel. The Seldrian recognized this was an opportune moment to attack Tyor. But their fear of the dragons, and their uncertainty of whether they were in Tyor or the wild lands, and how many there were, for the moment engrossed them completely, making them reluctant to show hostility to either side. But the stalemate could only last so long. There were 14 Casia packs and 11 Silj tribes. The Free Eagles were 13 leagues from Tyor's northern border. The Silj tribes' territories each stretched for 29 leagues. The Casia's 60. Though all were deemed to be reliable, not all were particularly friendly. Some, such as the Night Stalkers, a Silj tribe, and the White Claws, a Casia pack, weren't thrilled at the idea of a group of wanted people, one of whom was Tokwai, passing through their territory. Though Chief Amazua, Liseo, and Kahira were certain of their cooperation, due to the threat of the Seldrian, not everyone was convinced. Sumaisai was one of them, but this wasn't paid much attention to, since it mostly stemmed from prejudice against the Casia. Others, namely Merlara, Nahim, Ladiel, Tyor, and Tyor had other reasons, which once pointed out, were impossible to ignore. While Tyor's citizens were mostly of Tyorrian race, some were of Callagan, Biolan, or Silj race. Others, many of them Silj, were foreigners who due the unrest, were unable to leave Imithia. They now knew from the Eagles that Tyor was seizing both citizens and foreigners to do her bidding. They had every reason to suspect that willingly or not, she was using some as spies. In this regard, a Silj would be particularly useful in tracking Merlara, and since Aaron was to accompany her and her friends, that would only make it easier. Though during the day he could fly high enough to be mistaken for a bird, it was impossible for an experienced tracker not to notice signs of his presence, since he would eventually have to land to eat and sleep. Not all the Silj were nomads. Tyor, Ladiel, and Nahim argued that it would be easier for a spy to hide within a village than an encampment, so Tyor would most likely place her spies within tribal villages. And some might do it willingly, if Tyor knew what to say to gain their loyalty. Amazua wasn't pleased at the suggestion that any of his kin would harm someone with dragon blood, but was forced to acknowledge the possibility. While Chief Amazua, Liseo, Kahira and other elders of the tribe discussed the potential dangers of their journey, Amazua set sail so to school Merlara and her friends on the different customs of the Silj. Among other things, she taught them how to tell if a Silj was from a certain tribe. A young female wolf of the Protector's pack, called Asana, was also assigned to teach them what to expect from the Casia. Neither she nor Sumaisai were thrilled with this arrangement, but were obliged to consent to it. Merlara, Tyor, Tyor, and Aaron knew much of what was taught, but were surprised at how much they didn't know. Salso explained some things within the tribes and packs weren't meant to be common knowledge, among which were secret phrases and signs used between the two peoples. Merlara and her friends were more humbled than flattered by this sign of trust. "You have a great deal of faith in us to share such information," Sumaisai observed one afternoon. They had finished their last lesson that morning. Sumaisai had returned from hunting, and now sat with Merlara, Salsoa, Tyor, Tyor, and her brothers in the tent where they took their meals. "In such times as these, we don't have much choice," Salsoa answered. "You must know these things if we are to pass through the wild lands as soon as possible. Whether the prophecy Aaron and Merlara has seen will come to pass or not, history has taught us such visions are not to be ignored. The dragons almost destroyed themselves doing so." "Where is Aaron?" Tyor asked. "He seemed in a hurry to leave after our lesson." "He went hunting with Elist," Merlara said. "They'll be gone for some time, since they intend to eat enough so they won't have to hunt for a while." "Well, that's good for them," Sumaisai said cheerfully. "Since you and Kahira have dragon blood, perhaps you two could eat a few extra bowls of stew tonight, and be satisfied for a few weeks. We'll hunt less, and save a great deal of our rations." Merlara's annoyance at this statement increased, when she noticed Tyor making no attempt to hide his smile. Vasiri gave Sumaisai a warning look. "Her Majesty may now be our sister, but we still owe her the respect due to a queen." "Really, Vasiri, you know better than anyone that I take liberties with family." "Don't be ridiculous," Tyor said scornfully, "you take liberties with everyone and you know it." "Not exactly," Kunisk answered her. "Sumaisai says what she pleases, whether it be to royalty, warriors, or commoners. The difference here is that she means it in jest." He cast an amused look in her direction. "Or so she says. Sometimes I doubt her word." "If you had half the sense I do, you would always doubt her," Lestri retorted. "Thank you for defending me," Merlara said, "but I think I can handle Sumaisai's jesting." Lestri gave her a look of dismay. "That's exactly what I said when she first made fun of me. I'm afraid you won't last long." "Oh, trust me, she won't," Sumaisai answered slyly. Merlara glared at her, about to give a sharp reply, then thought better of it and changed the subject. "Tyor, 2 days ago you weren't present for our lessons. What did you have to tell my aunt and Chief Amazua?" "Not as much as they expected. But what little Higlek told me was significant, and was clearly before he began to distrust me. It's a pity, as I'm sure he and Tiriel have plans we ought to know of." "Well, that can't be helped now," said Tyor. "What were you able to tell them?" Tyrell gave him a doubtful but almost defiant look before answering. "Higlek and I spoke briefly of acquiring more Tulanil from Callagan by force. What I didn't know, was that while I thought of doing so only if they refused to help us, Higlek and Tiriel intended to steal from them without asking." Tyor and Sumaisai's brothers looked at her in shock. "Are you mad?" Tyor exclaimed, "Didn't you realize the folly of such an act? To start a war with your allies before an even greater war had begun." Tyrell looked at him angrily. Merlara and Salsoa exchanged glances. Amazua, Liseo, and Kahira had no doubt asked Tyrell similar questions, and she was in no mood to answer them again. "I'm quite aware of the fact that I made poor judgments," she said coldly. "Though I was wrong to consider such a deed, I considered it only as a last resort. My goal has always been to protect Tyor, to protect my tribe. At the time I reasoned your people would be forced to join the war against the Seldrian, making war between our people impossible." Tyor's face hardened at Tyrell's words. Merlara understood his anger. Tyrell may have been motivated by her desire to protect the people, but it didn't excuse her from such foolishness. Still, none of them could afford to be hostile if they were to travel together. "Peace, Tyor," she said, hoping to pacify him. "It's futile to argue over past offenses, especially when they never took place. I would agree with you, except that thanks to her folly and Higlek and Tiriel supporting it, there's still a chance Tiriel will attempt it." Merlara thought it best not to argue with him. Tyor was usually mild-mannered, but she'd learned long ago that his calm demeanor concealed a strong temper. His anger was never directed at her, but it made it harder to reason with him. "Though I wouldn't have stated it so strongly," Viserys said cautiously, "Tyor speaks truly. Our flight has made it clear to them that their only option is to strike back. Though they're not aware of our real reasons for doing so, they've doubtless realized we're going to Callagan." "I'm quite aware of this," Tyrell answered. "Tyriel will still attempt to steal the Tulanil, and now she knows of the dragons. Since it's just as effective against dragons as it is a Seldrian, she'll attempt to use it against them as well." She paused and looked at Merlara. "And I promise you, how she does so matters little to her. She will take any path she thinks will give her what she wants." Merlara's throat tightened. Tyrell's meaning couldn't be clearer. It was a reminder to be on her guard, to remember that the woman she grew up with wasn't real. Even though her betrayal had revealed her true character, Merlara still found herself thinking of her as she had for years. Somehow, Tyrell had sensed this, and for the first time, Merlara realized that in spite of her growing up with Tyriel, it was Tyrell who truly knew her. It was Seldrian who broke the silence. "Well, with that cheery thought in mind, perhaps you can tell us what she's planning." "They intend to send warriors disguised as ambassadors, to raid Callagan's stores. Of course, they couldn't take action until after Merlara was removed from the throne, and I only know of their true intentions, because of my feigned surrender. Even then, they didn't give me all the details. So concerning who they'll send, and how they plan to deceive the Emperor, I unfortunately know nothing of." There was a moment of silence, as everyone pondered the weight of this information. "Unless they've changed their plans," Seldrian said, "we won't be the only ones on the road." "Well, what of it?" Seldrian said indifferently, "If they find us, Aeron will eat them, and that'll be the end of that." "It's not that simple," Kunisk answered her. "We don't know for certain that they'll find us." "We debated on both those points," Tyrell said. "It was decided to send a message, as Tyor did, with a warning on what to expect should the warriors reach Callagan. Even if they've already left, which our spies have seen no evidence of, our message will reach Callagan first. As to what to do if they find us," she shrugged. "Well, unfortunately Seldrian is right. It would be better for Aeron to eat them, and be done with it." "Tyrell," Merlara said indignantly, "dragons may kill humans when threatened, but they never eat them. It is forbidden among their kind. Besides, though it may be preferable to leave the killing to Aeron, it could be necessary for us to kill them." "That may be, your majesty, but if we kill them, anyone who finds the bodies will know it was us. Few Silj tribes use swords, and at least 3 of us may be obliged to use them if we're attacked. It would be better if we let Aeron dispose of them. If he's careful, no one will be able to tell if a dragon or a Seldrian did the deed." "You have a point," Tyor said stiffly, "but I must say, Tyrell, you would do well to acquaint yourself with your history. You've been conditioned to think of the dragons in a certain way, without the respect they are due. Though some of what you know has a grain of truth, most of it is complete invention." Tyrell laughed bitterly. "I thank you for the advice, Captain, but it isn't needed. I've learned much in the past 2 weeks, that has completely reshaped my reality." "So have I," Merlara said quietly. Tyrell looked at her, conflicting emotions crossing her face. Merlara thought she had offended her until she smiled. Though it was a sad smile. Merlara sensed that though they weren't exactly friends, they had one thing many people who were couldn't claim: empathy.